Okay. Daf Yomi, they were starting on the Mishnah on Daf Yomi Pesachim. That's where we got up to yesterday. Masnis Revido Emir Baitkin or Yudalad, Uv Yudalad Shachris, Uv Shas Tabir. Revido says you check 3 times. The eve of Yudalad, 14th in the morning, Erev Pesach, and also at the time of the Biur. We'll see what he means. Chomer lebadik or Yudalad. If you didn't check on the evening, you take Yudalad. Lebadik Yudalad, you take Psachim Page. On Yantif, lebadik Psachim Page. Yivdek lachar moed. Check even after moed. Yeah, probably. We'll see. Whatever you have left, so you don't need bedika. Now, there's a big machlokes Rashi ties over here. Rashi says, if you see in the Mishnah, Psach HaMoed totally doesn't mean on Yantif. B'shah Shishis, Shu Moed Habir. Which means the Chacham are saying if you didn't check on the evening of Yudal, check Yudal in the morning. If you didn't check Yudal in the morning, you should check Psach HaMoed, which means on the 6th Moed Habir, the time of Bir.
That's what Rashi says. That Moed doesn't mean literally.
Psach HaMoed, B'shah Shishis, Shu Moed Habir. La'achar HaMoed. After the Moed Habir, according to Rashi, Moed means.
Like Rashi, not to give the question at the
right. Now, what's the shot? Why is Rashi saying like this? Right? So let's see. Taisus Pirsha Kuntris Shashish Sukashal Rabbi Yehuda Karli Shas Habir. Right? Because the Rabbi Yehuda Karli Shas Habir V'Lama Shinu L'Shainai. Right, Yehuda calls it Shas Habir, and now according to the Chacham, they're talking about the Moed. They're calling it Moed. Ella argues, Psach HaMoed Hainu Mitchila Sheva Ad Sefer Pesach. L'achar Moed Yivdoik Kidei Shelo Yis'arav Lo Yichametz Shel Iser V'Shel Heter V'Yechalenu. Chametz Shavlav Pesach is Aser, and you have regular chametz, right? It's mutter, so therefore you shouldn't be mixed up, right? So yes, he does explain that. However, Taisus understands why Rashi is doing what he's doing. Rashi's premise throughout this parak is that the idea of bedika, according to the Mishnah, in the Mishnah is bedika functions so that you shouldn't be over bali ra bali matzah. Because according to Rashi, if not for bedika, you would be over bali ra bali matzah because the Mishnayos aren't dealing with bittul. The Gemara deals with bittul. Rav says you have to do bittul, but the Mishnayos themselves are talking about a situation where you do bedika and not bittul. Because back in the way the Ran explains is back in the time of the Mishnah, there was no takana to do bittul. Only if you were stuck somewhere, you couldn't do bedika, so you did bittul. Right? So therefore, you doing bedika functions as right, and if you don't do bedika, you're everybody rabbi matzah, right? So now this person who didn't do bedika on Erev Pesach at all, if you tell him to go do bedika on Yantif, so then what's going to be? He's going to Shema Yimtza Gulska Yafe. He's going to find the Gulska Yafe, and he's going to be over because he didn't do bittul. Because according to Rashi, there's no bittul here, right? So Mimela, according to him, according to Rashi, we can't tell you to go and check for chametz on Yom Tif because then we're basically telling you to fall into this trap of being over Bali Ra Bali Matzah. So now when is Bali Ra Bali Matzah chal? On Pesach itself. It's even though we had a sugya in Daf that says that the mitzvah of Tashbisu and the Isser of chametz and the Isser Hana of chametz is from Chatzos. Yeah. We're not over Bali Ra Bali Matzah until the night. And therefore Rashi says that it's impossible for the Mishnah to be saying that you're doing bedika on Yom Tif itself from the night onwards. Therefore, the latest time you can do bedika is that last Rashi in the Mishnah that he says, right, Mishei Shois Ulmala Ad Shetech until evening. But once evening hits, then the Isser Bali Ra Bali Matzah hits, and therefore we can't tell you to do bedika anymore.
What does he cite Menachos for?
Where?
Started.
It's probably in the lashon of that he's calling Shas Hamayit. He's calling, I'm not sure. see. Right, so that's the way Taisus understands over here. So the idea is, again, right, it's important to understand that from Chatzais, it's Asur B'Achila and it's Asur Din Hashbasa, it's Din, right, to get rid of it. But BeiRav Al Yamatzeh, it's still only Kol Shiva, it's only during the 7 days of Pesach. Therefore, according to Rashi, you can check until then. But once Bal Yerah is going to be real, we don't tell you to go check. According to Taisus, anyway, Bal Yerah, Bal Yamatzeh is not a real threat because you did bittul, and the Mishnayos are dealing with the person who did bittul also. When Rabbi Yehuda Marav says Habaydik Sarch Shevatel, he's explaining the Mishnayos. He's not saying a new thing, right? And therefore, according to Taisus, it's not really a threat of Bal Yerah, Bal Yamatzeh. Check on Pesach, no problem.
Does Taisus agree that Bal Yerah, Bal Yamatzeh kicks in the strength?
Yeah.
Everybody agrees.
Yeah, but he doesn't care because he did bittul.
I don't understand.
Right. Yeah, I think everyone agrees to that. Okay, now the Gemara is going to say, I'm going to try to explain the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda. And then again, according to Taisus, the function of bedika once there is bittul, what's the point? That's Taisus' first kash in the Masechta. If there's bittul, we need bedika. Right? That's Taisus' first kash. And that's how we know that Taisus holds that the Mishnah is dealing with bittul. According to Taisus, the issue is Shema Yechal. You might end up finding a piece of chametz and eating it.
In that instant.
On Pesach, no. On Pesach. So, well, once you have bittul, what do you need bedika anymore? Shad is you might come across a piece of chametz on Pesach and you might have to eat it. Therefore, get rid of it, right? Practically, bittul just makes it not a problem. Mitzad Bal Yerah Bal Yamatzeh, right? But it's still also to eat it after you mevatel it. You might eat it, right? But we'll see in the Gemara, the Chachamim hold that if we tell you to go be baidik on Yom Tif, we're not choshesh that if you're going to be baidik, you're going to end up eating it because we're telling you to go get rid of it, right? If you come across it stamazoi, you might come to eat it. Therefore, be baidik before Yom Tif, right? But if we're going to tell you to be baidik, so we're not choshesh you're going to eat it. Therefore, it's mutter for you to check on Yom Tif. Rabbi Yehuda says not. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who's choshesh that you might come to eat it even though you're being baidik. Okay, so it says the Gemara. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. So they say, let's first get this out of the way because there's a havamin over here. There's a havamin is that Rabbi Yehuda, when he says you he means you talk after baidik 3 times. And how does he know that? The 3 times the Torah says get rid of your chametz. It says that's one pasuk. 3 psukim that tell you to get rid of chametz, right? Therefore, you have to check 3 times. It's like a mitzvah to check 3 times. According to this havamim, utikas chametz is d'oraisa, right? It's mamash to do it 3 times.
It also says in the too.
You're saying the pasuk that the Gemara brought before. Right, why doesn't the Gemara count that?
I guess let's say it's just review.
Mishnah Torah. we did bring it in before. Right. On Daf Daled, the Gemara brought it in the Chalacha. I hear, but good question. The we should count that too. I'm not sure why. Okay, so Masar of Yosef, in fact, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he has a brayso that says Rabbi Yehuda Omer kol sheloi bodak b'shloisha brakim halalu shuv einu bodak. Anyone who didn't check during these 3 times, shuv einu bodak, he should not be bodak anymore. So you see from here, it's not so clear, but you see why is he saying shuv einu bodak? It sounds like the emphasis
The point of Rabbi Yehuda
is that these are the 3 opportunities to be bodak, not that you have to be bodak each time.
Unlike Rabbanon, don't check on Yom Tif.
Right. He's saying shuv and that's the main point. Shuv and don't do it anymore afterwards, right? Sounds like his whole thing is that you have these 3 times and opportunities to check. Not that you have to check all 3 times. We see they're arguing about whether you can check later, right? Further on Yom Tif, they're not arguing about if you have to check more than once. Marzutra masni hachi, he says it more beferish. Marzutra Masar of Yosef. He has a brayso. Reviewed Omer kol shaloi bodak be'echad mishloisha brakim halalu. That's even much more beferish. It says be'echad mishloisha brakim halalu. If you didn't check in one of these 3 times, shuv and bodak. Alma Obviously, you see over here that we only is mechayiv to check once, and the machlokes is b'shuv neboidik with the pligi. Okay, fine. Elo Rabbi Yehuda nami im loy bodik kamer. He means if you didn't check, you have 3 opportunities to check. Or not, if you didn't check on the evening, you have 2 more in the morning, and then b'shas habir. V'hacha b'hakam rifkin. This is the machlokes marsavar mekame yisura in basar yisura loy. Only when do we tell you to check? Only before it's asr. Before it becomes asr ba'achila, right? Basar isura loy. After it gets asr ba'achila, loy. We're not going to. But no loy. There is no chiyuv bedika. Why? Gzeira dilma asila mechal minei. So when does the isra achila? When is the isra achila chal midah? Right. So by chatzos, right, and midrabanan from the beginning in the 6th hour. Right, that's shas habir, and therefore from that point we don't allow you. Actually, it's true. The sheet is that you're not allowed to eat it during the 5th hour too. But that's only the rabbanon. Maybe that's why he holds you. It's fine. We'll see.
Well, he says
the end of the daf, He says tolan. So it means the whole 5th hour you're not allowed to eat either, right? But maybe that's only the rabbanon, right? So therefore, he allows you to do b'dika at that point, only during shas habir. But shas habir is also necessary, unless he means shas habir. Right, when Revuta says shas habir, what does he mean? Does he mean chatzais, which is shas habir midoraisa? Does he mean the 6th hour? That's the rabbanon. So you should go right in the following. Right, Rabbi Yehuda, the next mishnah. That means so. Could be means at that point you're already not allowed to do b'dika anymore.
Only the afternoon though forbidden is not yet separate to cars during Pesach. Even rabbanon we do not search for covers, so it's subject to much more severe.
Okay. Whatever it is. The view of Svara is that Mikame Yisura in Basar Yisura Loi. Once it's Asr, you can't do B'dik. We're not going to tell you. Gzeira Dilma Asr L'Mechal Mineh. You might come Gzeira Dilma Asr L'Mechal Mineh. So maybe it means the Chatzais actually a Chatzais. You might come to eat it, right? So once it's Asr, we don't want you to do B'dik. You might come to eat it. For Rabbanan Savri Legazrin, Rabbanan hold. We're not going to such a thing. Now the Gemara is going to go through it and compare different cases where Yehuda versus the Rabbanan. Are they goes or are they not goes? Because Rabbi Yehuda Dilmas review the Chaysh such a thing that we have Isser around, you might end up eating it. Vatnan, we have a mission in Menachas Mishikar Omer. Once the Omer was brought, people would go out into the Shuk Moitzin Shuk Yerushalayim and they would find the markets in Yerushalayim and Melayim Kamach Kali. They're filled with ready flour, and Kali is kernels that are roasted and then going to be ground into flour also. Kamach v'kali, right? The point is that it's ready, right? Now, and shaloi b'ratzon chachamim divrei meir. This was not the ratzon chachamim because you have to wait until the omer is mutter to eat, right? It's not mutter to eat yet, so don't deal with it, right? It just became mutter a second ago. Why? How's it in the stores already? It must be the Elam was dealing with it, and they were already making flour, and that's not good because you might come to eat. Right, that's divrei meir. No problem. It is b'ratzon chachamim, right?
We don't worry about that.
The like guys are behind the masad mechal minei. Stira by chametz geyser. Marav shani chadash mitach shlei tartale elali de kiduf. Because you only matter him to chop, to cut, to harvest the chadash. Only al yidei kituf, if you pluck it out of the ground and you don't harvest with a knife, with a regular sickle or whatever, in the regular way, therefore you remember. Everybody. If you cut chametz, if you cut chadash before the zman ha'omer, before the omers,
you must do it by plucking.
You must do it b'shina. And that, right, that'll remind you not to eat it, right? Rashi says because the omer has to be the reishis ketzircha. right? And the rachis hakotzer has to be the first thing that you cut. You can't cut anything else before. So how are they cutting before? It must be alidei shinoi. They're doing alidei shinoi, that's mutter. Also, if you're doing alidei shinoi, you'll remember the worker who's cutting is going to remember not to chew it, not to eat it. So I'm like, abaye teinach b'shas katifa. Fine, that's when you actually harvest it. But china v'akada ma'ikal meimar. What about when you grind it? Grind it and sift it. Where's the halakasha tchina b'rechai deyad? We only allow you to do tchina with a hand mill, and harkadal gabe napa on the top, on the upside down part of the napa. You're not doing it on the regular part of the sifter. Right. So they're going to remember. So the Gemara, Ella, well, how about hadutanan? Kaitzin beis hashlachim. Beis hashlachim are the fields that need more water, so you have to artificially water them. So the produce doesn't grow so well. V'sheba makim also deeper fields, right? So that you let it be kaitzin beferish. Avaloi gaichin, but you don't make you don't pile it up into haystacks, into stacks. Now, Rashi explains that there are really two psukim in the parsha of Chadash. One pasuk says, Reishis Kitzirchem says that you only allowed that the Omer has to come from the first Kitzira. The other pasuk says, Uptsartem is Kitzira va'avestem. You see, so you are allowed to harvest first. Are you allowed to harvest first? Or are you not allowed to harvest first? Does the Omer have to be the Reishis or not?
So different fields.
So different. That's right. So the Gemara says depends. If it's from a field that it would be proper to bring the actual carbon Omer from, because it's a good meshubach field, so therefore
there's a pasuk that says that Omer has to come from the best, but that's just Swara.
How do we know? Maybe because Rashis. Yeah, it's more. Rashi says Ein Mevin Salas Mincha Lo Meves Avom Levas Shlochem. How do we know that? Maybe because of carbon has to be Muvchor. Maybe we learn from Hevel. From Kain and Hevel. I'm not sure exactly what the Makar is, but that's a given, and therefore the Isser of being Kaitzer before the Omer is only in the good fields, but in the Beis Hashlachim, in the Ba'amakim, no problem, right? You might come to eat it. And we say that this Mishnah that says Kaitzer Beis Hashlachim in a regular way, let it be Kaitzer, not Kaitif, Kaitzer, right? Avaloi Gaichin, V'ikimna ki Rabbi Yehuda, and we established in Menachos, the Gemara establishes that this Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says, according to Rav Meir, if he doesn't let you even have it in the stores, Rav Meir says, so of course he wouldn't let you do this, so it's Daf Rabbi Yehuda, and still he's not Geyser, so Ma'ikal Elmor, right? So again, why is Rabbi Yehuda not Geyser Chodesh if he's Geyser Chametz? Elmor, by Chodesh Badal Minei. Chodesh, people are used to not eating it already the whole year. They're not eating Chodesh, right? From the new grain. Chametz li Badal Minei. Chametz, you're eating it all the time except for these 7 days, right? So therefore, it's a problem. People don't separate themselves from it. You have to be extra machmir. And this is the general Rishonim, whenever they talk about the chumrah of chametz and why we're guys are bedika, our guys all these different things. One of the svaras is karetz, one of the svaras is this. At chametz li badal minei. Okay. Amar Rava, the Rabbi Yehuda Kashya, the Rabbanan like Kashya. Why are you only asking a stira between Rabbi Yehuda, right? The Rabbanan also, who are not guys are here, right? Why are they guys are over there? Gemara says so. The Rabbi Yehuda like Kashya kedishanina. Like we explained, Chadash is very different. Why were the Chachamim, who I guess is Rav Meir, I think we're assuming it's Rav Meir, right? Why are they geyser over there? Because you might come to eat it. Talking about come to eat it over here, you're going to come to eat it. We're telling you to do bedika and go burn it. You're going to come to eat it. There's no chashash. If we're telling you to get rid of it, there's no chashash that you might come to eat it. Therefore, chametz is different, and it's even more makeup, or more makeup. Vashi, he has a different text. Why? Kemach v'kali tanan. There's no stira. Kemach and kali aren't rei lachila yet. Can't eat flour, right? So therefore, he says. Therefore, Yehuda says there's no problem. It says Gemara, v'hadar bashi bedusahi. It's wrong. Hatenach mikli mikali ve'elach. You're right. It's not rei lachila when it's kali, but mikara ad kali. Our kasha from before about the process to get to kali. It is still soft and you might come to eat it. Kali is after it's already hard and dried and you can't eat it at that point. But before that you could. They might come to eat that. is you're going to answer the same thing like we said before, that it's Bishinoi, right? So could the right? The same kasha we had before. Okay, fine. You took care of that. But what about same kasha? Go back around, right? El Rabashi would do see. Again, Rabashi is not making sense. It's Badusi. It's wrong. Okay. Says the Gemara. Now the Gemara is asking, are you telling me, oh yes, that since loy badul minei chametz, something like chametz, which people aren't used to separating from, therefore he's going to be geyser. Vatnan in Masechta Shabbos, lo yikov adam shvafer shel beitza. You shouldn't make a hole in a shell of an egg. V'malena shemen v'tinam etzad aner. Fill it up with oil, right, and put it next to the candle. B'shil shtem and atefes, so it drips into the ner. Even if it's made out of cheres and it's disgusting, you don't really want to touch it, right? It's still a problem according to the Chachamim. Why? Because you might come to take out oil. You take out oil because the oil is designated for the candle. It's like mechaber, right? So therefore, Chachamim say, right, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't even have this situation because you might come to take it out. Rabbi Yehuda Matir Yehuda allows it, right? So what do you see? Even though it's something that's loy badul minei, because shemen you have all the time. It's only Shabbos you don't have shemen, right? So therefore, we still see Rabbi Yehuda is not geyser, right? So Gemara says, yeah, because Hasam Mishum Chumah de Shabbos Mivdal B'dili. So Shabbos creates a certain vigilance that a person is badal from it, and therefore on Shabbos, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda is mater. Says the Gemara, okay. V'rami de Shabbos HaShabbos de Tanya. And we can ask a steer between Rabbi Yehuda on Shabbos. Tanya Chevel Delisha Nivsak. If you have a bucket that you fill water up with, and the rope severed, got cut. Lo yekaisher, you can't cut it. Elo einvei, make a bow. No problem, says the Tanna Kama, make a bow. Yehuda Omer, no, you can't make a bow. Karachal of punda or piskaya. Right, we just had this right. Yehuda Omer, karachal of punda or piskaya. You can wrap around the severed rope or the bucket, right? You're gonna wrap around a punda. Punda is like a wallet belt, pundasa. They're going to harbais, but pundasa, right? It's like a wallet belt, or piskaya is some type of band that they used to have. As long as you don't do aniva, you can't make a bow. So what do you see over here? There's geyser, right? On by shofar shel beitza, by the shemen Rabbi Yehuda's mater. Over here, all of a sudden he's geyser. You can't do aniva. Why? Because you might do kshira, right? The Gemara is assuming right now that aniva is usher because you might come to kshira. Zera else kshira, right? So by shemen you're not geyser, but because it's Shabbos. No, people know to be careful on Shabbos. So why by aniva are you geyser to kshira? So kasha de Yehuda and kasha de Rabbanan also, because the Rabbanan by shemen say it's usher, and over here they say it's fine. They're not geyser. So
go ahead, don't worry about kshira.
Right, and it's like kasha shemen b'shemen michlaf. Shemen with other shemen is michlaf. The Chachamim hold, right?
The oil on the lamp is the same as oil you use all the week. So then
you might get confused.
Even though it's shine.
Just like I used it. Right, I'm used to using oil, right? So therefore, right? Just a second.
What, they're afraid of cooking?
Yeah, huh?
The Chachamim are afraid of cooking?
No, you might come to just take out the oil. The oil is designated for the ner.
What are we going to do with it?
Maybe eat it, I guess, something, yeah.
Okay. Salad dressing.
Right. Rashi says, "Al silamichla." He says that. You might come to eat it, right? So yeah, it's a problem. You might come to eat it, right? And therefore, Shem and Michlaf, right? You might get confused and end up using it because during the week you use it, right? But Aniva b'kshira Michlaf. I tell you to do Aniva, people would say, "Oh, I might do kshira." Those are two distinct actions. One's Aniva, one's a bow, and one's an actual knot. People don't get confused, so therefore they're not geyser. So Rabbi Yehuda, the real like kasha. What about Rabbi Yehuda, who's geyser by Aniva and not by kshira? Like Kash, time to read the Lamishum the Gozar Niva to Kshir. It's not Xer at all. He doesn't hold of Xeris on Shabbos because Mivdal Bilamine. Why? He holds Aniva is just like Shira. It's the same exact thing. It's Av Malacha. Since it's an Av Malacha, I can't be mater, right?
In itself is also, and it's by itself, not because of it.
Not because of Xer. Rami Rabbanan Rabbanan. We have another Kasha on the Rabbanan. It's non Kaishvan Dli Piskaya V'Lei B'Chevel. You let it be Kaisher Dli Piskaya with this band, right? Of a loy b'chevel, not with a rope. Rabbi Yehuda mater, he is mater, right? Now I guess we're not talking about aniva, we're talking about actual kshira, right? So it says in chevel demai. What type of chevel are we talking about? Chevel dalma, just a regular rope. Rabbi Yehuda mater, kesher shel kayamahu. Rabbi Yehuda mater, kesher shel kayamahu. The vade asaliv tuli. Of course, you can end up leaving it there. Right, and it's going to be shel kayama. It's not shy. You're going to end up taking it away. Why? It's a good rope. It's a regular rope. You're knotting it. So how could possibly Yehuda allow you to do it? El pshita must be. We're not talking about regular rope. We're talking the gardi. We're talking about a weaver's rope, and you're not going to leave it there because you want it for your weaving or whatever, right? So therefore, it's not what's meant to be there. So therefore, Rabbi does matter, and he says, don't worry. You could tie it because it's not shel kayama because you're for sure going to take it out. Right, but the Rabbanon hold it's a problem. The Gazru Rabbanon, Chevel, the Gardi, Atu, Chevel the Alma. The Rabbanon all of a sudden they are Geyser Chevel the Gardi, Atu Chevel the Alma, right, and only over here they say only Kaishon Dli Bipiskaya, but now at the Chevel. So why by Chevel the Gardi the Geyser Atu Chevel the Alma, right? But by Aniva and Shira they don't care, right? By Aniva, they weren't geyser, right? But over here, all of a sudden, they do care. The Gemara says, in Chevel, B'Chevel, Michlaf, Aniva, B'Shir, Michlaf. So if we allow you this rope, you might end up using the real rope. But Aniva and Kshira are two separate actions. Again, they hold. There's no confusion over there. So as the Gemara, V'Chleicha, the Badal Minei, like Gazer, Rabbi Yehuda, another kasha. Is it true that every time that Rabbi Yehuda, like just by Chomet, that, that just like by Chodesh, Chometz. Chodesh. Chodesh is a case where Badal Minei, right? The whole year you separate yourself. Chometz isn't, and Shabbos also, according to Yehuda, is a din of Badal Minei, right? But Kol Eicha did Badal Minei loy Gazer. Yehuda does not Gazer because we know that you already have this vigilance. Tanya B'chor Shach Zaydam, if a B'chor that had an issue in his blood, right, and it has some sickness. Va'afilu who mace, even if it's dying, ein makizin leidam, you can't, right? The cure would be to extract some blood, to do some bloodletting to this cow, right? Still, it's usher. Why? Because you might end up, strictly speaking, right? It's a behemoth of kachim, you're not allowed to make a mum, right? But a mum is only in a place where it doesn't grow back. Right, a mum would be to cut something off, to cut off chop off some flesh, or cut off some.
That'll peel.
Right, and you're just making a puncture to take out blood from whatever. That's not a mum at all, right? So why is it usher? Because it must be Yehuda's geyser, right? Yehuda's geyser that you're not allowed to take out blood from even a place where doesn't make a mum. Atu, in the case you might make a mum. So you see, even though kachim are something that bedila in shemine, people don't use it. Kachim is separated. It's right. It's separated for kedusha, right? And people aren't going to use it, right? So therefore, according to Yehuda, you shouldn't be geyser such things, right? So why is Yehuda geyser and says that you can't even take out dam from a place where there's no chashash of mum? Atu, maybe you might take out from chashash of mum. Why? Something that bedili minei, right? Just like Chadash, people are badal minei, so they know not to do the asr thing. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Chamamayim yakiz, cham takahol. You could be do akaza. Uvad shelo yatul boimum. Right, as long as you don't make a mum, it's fine. Where it says, you know why Rabbi Yehuda's guys over there is hasam mitayf adam bohol alma mainoi. Amrinan we say, Isharis le b'makom she'ein oisim boimum. Because it's something that it's a big monetary loss. So if we tell him, sorry, Charlie, don't touch it, so then he leaves. But if you start letting him do do things to save his money, so he might get all anxious about it and even do in a place that there's a moon, right? So because it's something that's worth a lot of money, and therefore since it's worth a lot of money, a person might go too far. Masha Enkein by Chadash, right? It's not such a big loss, whatever. It's not my right. Rabbanon says the Gemara. Rabbanon kol shekein di iloi sharis le klal asilam. The Rabbanon svara, right, is that even though usually we might be geyser, right? The Rabbanon are more geyser than, right, by Chadash at least, right? Not by chametz. By chametz, they have a special svara to tell you that you're not going to eat it because you're going to burn it, right? But otherwise, they are geyser, right? So why over here they're not going to be geyser? Is the kol shekein di iloi sharis? You don't let him. Right? If you're being minded to the svara of Adam Bolam money, so if you don't let him, of course he's going to do it, right? So therefore you have to let him something. Says the Gemara, me I'm reading on Rabbi Yehuda. Do we say this concept of Adam Bolam money? On Rabbi Yehuda, ein mekadrin or garden habehema b'yamtif. Basically, the animals used to get dirty from dirt, and you would want to comb it off. You would have these brushes, these hard brushes, either made out of wood or metal, right? So you can't do that on Yom Tov. It has sharp teeth, and it'll make a chabura in the animal. That's an isser deraisa of chabura, right? On Yom Tov and Shabbos, right? So you can't do it. On the kartzif, right? The wooden one, which is mekartzif, the same thing, just with wood. That's mutter. Chacham amrim ein mekadrin, af ein mekartzifin. Chacham don't allow it at all. They are geyser. Right, just like they're geyser, I guess, by right. The Chachamim, they're geyser by Chadash, and they're geyser by the Shemen. We know they're geyser, right? So Chachamim is not a kasha, but according to Yehuda, why all of a sudden, Betanya, let's see, Ezo Kidur, Ezo Kirtov, Kidur Ketanim, Kidur are small, like a small comb, but it's hard. V'Eisen Chabura, it makes holes, makes bruises. Kartov is Gedolim, it's bigger comb, but it's made out of wood. Ve'ein Eisen. And nice and chavura. Sticker teeth, it doesn't, right. So therefore it's mutter according to Yehuda. But says the Gemara, kasha, on the one hand you're telling me, right, the Bechar, if you let him in, if you let him do something, he might go too far. So over here, if you let him take care of his animal, he wants the animal to be healthy, right? And doesn't want to have that monetary loss. So if you let him do with one brush, he might do with the other brush too. Right. So the Gemara says, Hassan be the Ishavik Leimayis. No. By that Kazas Hadam, by the Bukhar case,
serious trouble.
Right? He's going to die. So Amrina, we say Adam Balam Amayne. Hacha Ishavikle, if you let it, Tsar Ba'almahu, right? It's just a little pain for the animal. It doesn't really depreciate the animal's value, right? So therefore, Lay Amrina Adam Balam Amayne. And therefore, over here, we do it. It's no problem, right? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, Mai Shnaga Bechametz the Gazar, Mai Shnaga Bekartzach the Gazar. We have one loose end to fill by. According to Yehuda, by chametz he's geyser, right? He holds of gzeiras, right? By chametz he's geyser. Ma'ishno gabi kartzov the loy gazar. Where it says lechem belechem michlaf, right? You might get confused and think, oh, yesterday I ate bread, now I could also eat bread, right? Kidu bekirtzov loy michlaf, right? So therefore, according to him, there's no Indian to be geyser because these are two separate, distinct things. So even though right, again, over here, according to you don't have the svara of bedili and shemine because we let you do the kidur, right? Right. So therefore, what's the reason he's not geyser over here? That's because this thing is something that you don't get confused. Right. Still, he holds that you might come to eat it because lechem belechem is michlaf. Kidur b'kirtzov is loy michlaf. Right, so it comes out that Rabbi Yehuda, right, Rashi goes through it, right? He says in the previous Amud, Rashi says, Chevel b'chevel milchem, says, Rabbanon gazu koleicha d'michlaf bein b'Shabbos bein b'shar isurei. Rabbanon are geyser, any place that you might have, you might get confused and assume heter in other places. So whether it's Shabbos, whether it's shar isurim, it's aser. Hilkach chadash, l'fnei ha'aymer gazru. V'chein b'shvei feres, v'chein b'chevel, they're always going to be geyser. Aval b'chametz like just chametz not because there's a specific svar by chametz, right? You're coming to burn it, so you're not going to be geyser. Uvaniva not milay, and by making a bow also they hold that's something that's not mechlaf. And Yehuda's geyser, anything that's dilimine, right? He's geyser. Many is Rebbe the loy b'dil minay is geyser. He's the b'dil minay. He's not geyser. Okay, Mom should have to shop us. Yeah. Okay. The Paris and the okay, says the Mishnah. The fifth hour, you're allowed to eat. The beginning of the sixth hour, you have to start burning already. Even though midoraisa only chatzais is at the time you have to burn, but the Chacham said at the beginning of the sixth already you start burning, and therefore the whole fifth you're allowed to eat. And right away after the fifth hour comes the sixth hour, you burn. Fourth hour you eat. The fifth hour you're not allowed to eat, leave it. The sarfin b'tchilas sheish, you start burning at the beginning of sheish. During this period of tliya, right? It's also it's mutabano. You're allowed to give it to your animal. You're not allowed to eat it. You don't have to burn it until 6. There were two loaves of taida bread that were puzzle. Right? How they got puzzled, the Gemara is going to talk about. Right? Munachos al gabe itztava. They were in the Beis Hamikdash. The practice on Erev Pesach would be that on top they would have some stage.
The
chametz.
It's only 10 to 40 that
Right. Rashi says chametz loaves. But this was just an indicator how people would know what time it is and where we're holding in terms of getting rid of the chametz. Right. So the way they would do it, he says, is there would be 2 chalas shaltaida psulos menachos al gabe itztava in a higher place, where people will be able to see. As long as they were there, as long as both were there, they know, okay, you can still eat it. Nitla achas, one was taken off and one was still on. So then Thailand, they knew that was the period of time where you're toilet, but you're allowed to give it to the animals. Nitlu shteim, they were both taken off. Surfing. Then everyone knew it's time to burn, right? So this is how they indicated it. No, well, they knew how they knew the hours. They had a sun, had a sundial, whatever that they had ways of telling time. Rabbi Eliyahu Raful, that chulin you're allowed to eat only for the 4th hour. Truma kol chamesh, right? So what he's adding over here is in this period of time that Rabbi Yehuda says Thailand, he allows you to eat truma also. Why? Because for truma and kachim, right, we want you to have the most time to eat it, right? Because it's also to be mafsid kachim by yadayim, right? To waste kachim is an isser, right? So therefore, we give you more time to eat it, so you don't have to burn it. The sarfim b'tchilas sheish. Okay, non-hasam. Now the Gemara is going to bring in a sugya by edus because it relates to our sugya in terms of people mistaken what time it is. For example, so Rav Meir is right. Why can't you eat it the entire 6th hour? Because people might confuse between the 6th hour and the 7th hour. 7th hour it's usher to eat, gets to start burning already. So therefore, the whole 6th, right? We have to say it's usher also because someone might say during the 7th hour that it's still the 6th hour. No, it's still the 6th hour. You can still eat. Don't worry. So therefore, we say no. 6 is also usher. And Rabbi Yehuda says 5th is also usher because someone might make a mistake between 7th and so we'll see, right? So they're arguing essentially in how much a person can be mistaken as to what the time is, right? So now there's a parallel sugya by Eids the Gemara is going to bring and eventually going to ask. It's non-hasam. Echad oimer b'shnayim b'chodesh. If one of the Eidim come and say, let's say they're coming to be made that Reuven killed Shimon, right? One says it was on the 2nd day of the month. This is the 3rd day of the month. Eidusin kayemis. So that is no problem, even though they're essentially contradicting themselves, and when witnesses contradict themselves, so the charetz apostle Eidos, no, but it's not a problem. This one knew that we added a date to the previous month, and therefore today is not shlosh, it's shnayim, right? Because Rosh Chodesh was the day later. The discrepancy between the two Eidim is not assumed to be because of their lying, but rather because they don't know the date. Well, how can they not know the date? Because it could change. One knows that the last month was in Iber Chodesh and one doesn't. If one says it's the 3rd of the month, and one say it was in the 5th of the month, right? then how you can't be 1 day off in the day, more than 1 day off in the day. You can't be 2 days off, right? There's only one extra day of Rosh Chodesh that you might make a mistake about, but not 2 days. Okay. And so therefore we cannot reconcile their testimonies, and therefore it's bata. Let's say a guy says the murder happened in the 2nd hour of the day, one says it happened in the 3rd hour of the day. It doesn't kayemis because it's only 1 hour off. 3rd hour and the 5th hour, that's too far away from each other. That's Reb Meir's chief. No, it's fine.
Why?
Because he holds that we'll see. The Gemara is going to explain that he holds that the margin of error of a person who's trying to tell time, he thinks it's 2 hours earlier. He doesn't realize they don't have clocks back then, right? So you judge by the sun. So you might make that mistake. So the Gemara is going to explain different mahalachim in the machlekes. Now, however, even Rabbi Yehuda, who allows the discrepancy of 2 hours, but he says if echad omer b'chamesh ve'echad omer b'sheva, yidusin b'tela. Why? Because shebechamesh chama b'mizrach. Even though it's the same 2 hour difference, right? But it's different. It's a different time. It's a different 2 hours. Why? Because in the 5th hour of the day, chamas b'mizrach, the sun is still eastwards. Uvsheva, but 7 hours already, chamas b'mayrav. Why? Because it's chatzos is in between, right? So in the 7th hour, it's after chatzos already, so it's the sun already passed the midpoint. It's already towards the west. In the 5th hour, it's way before chatzos, and therefore it's east. If you can't make the mistake between whether it's the 5th hour or the 7th hour, 3rd hour and 5th hour are both easter. So you didn't measure correctly exactly. But this people don't make such a mistake. Okay. Now Abai is going to explain. He's going to have 2 malachim, and then Rav is going to have. Amar Abai, kishtim salayim of different mayor. You want to explain that according to Rav Meir, the idea is kishtim salayim is like an expression that more has it means when you want to explain. If you want to make a pshat here, so Amar Abai, kishtim salayim, that the pshat is like this. The different Meir, ein adam tayev v'lei klum. Person really shouldn't make any mistake. And aid who comes, there's no margin of error at all. Ein adam tayev v'lei klum. The dir Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, adam tayev chatzi shah. Yehuda allows a discrepancy of a half hour that you can make a mistake. So what's the pshat? Dir Rabbi Meir, ein adam tayev v'lei klum. What's the pshat? Ma'aseh ki hava. Right again, Rabbi Meir accepts if one says the 2nd hour shtei shais and one says shalosh shais. Rabbi Meir accepts that, right? Why? Why does he accept that? Doesn't Rabbi Meir not allow for any margin of error? Ein adam tayev v'lei klum. Because Ma'aseh ki have, the story that happened was b'meifak tarti at the end of 2 mile plus. It's exactly at 3 o'clock. It was exactly at the 3rd hour, at the beginning of the 3rd hour. Not really 3 o'clock, whatever. There's no 3 o'clock, right? But it's at the 3rd hour. V'hadika Amar Shtaim. So this one that says 2 hours, he really meant the end of 2. V'hadika Amar Shalosh, he meant B'tchila Shalosh. Right? So according to Rav Meir, it's not pshat. He says, we allow for this margin of error. No, it's we interpret what the Edom say. And the Edom, he said 2nd hour of the day, the 3rd hour of the day. So the Bezdin says, there's no contradiction here. They really meant exactly at the same time. One, he's saying at the end of the 2nd, he's saying at the beginning of the 3rd, but it's really the same exact time. Yuda Imer, Adam Toya Chatzi Shah, right? So he says, Ma'aseh ki hava. The Bezdin assumes that the Ma'aseh Kihava is bepalgada arbehava. It was halfway through the 4th hour. So the Haidika Amar Shalosh, right? Yehuda, he even allows one who says Shalosh and one who says Chamesh, right? So what's pshat over there? Because Yehuda says Ma'aseh Kihava must be bepalgada arbehava. Really, it happened halfway through the 4th hour. Haidika Amar Shalosh, this one that says at the 3 hour mark, that's when it happened. B'saif shalosh, he means at the end of 3 hours, right? Doesn't mean in the 3rd hour. He means at the very end of the 3rd hour. And he is only making an error regarding a half hour, right? He's saying a half hour early. This one that says at the 5th hour where the murder happened, right? He says b'tchilas chamesh. Really, he means b'tchilas chamesh. And he's just making a mistake half hour later, right? So Rabbi Yehuda allows for a half-hour margin of error. This aide says the murder happened in the 3rd hour. This one said it happened in the 5th hour, right? We say, well, really, so how do we reconcile this? We don't say their aide is possible, because we could reconcile this according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because we allow for margin of error for a half hour. The first aide meant at the end of the 3. The second aide meant the beginning of 5. Really, it happened smack in the middle of 4:30, right? So therefore, they're only a half hour off, and that's not a problem. That's one mahalach. A different shot. The Divrei Meir Adam Taya Mashihu. Or Divrei Meir, you could be Taya a little bit. Divrei Yehuda Adam Taya Shah Umashihu. An hour and a little bit. How does he explain it? Like this. Divrei Meir Adam Taya Mashihu. Maisa ki have, we would assume oy b'soif shtayim have oy b'tchila shalosh. Doesn't make a difference. The Maisa could have been either at the end of the 2nd hour or the beginning of the 3rd hour. Meir says it's not a problem. Why? Because the one who says, even if it had happened at the end of 2, a guy can make a mistake and think it happened at the beginning of 3. Even if it happened at the beginning of 3, a guy might make a mistake that happened at the end of 2. So that's not a problem. Rav Meir allows for a little bit of a margin of error. Mashu, right? One of them is just mistaken a little bit. Rabbi Yehuda Adam Taya Shau Mashu. Maisa ki have oy b'sayf shalosh oy b'tchilas chamish. Either it happened at the end of 3 or the beginning of 5, right? And v'chad minayu katoi sha'u mashihu, right? One of them is making. We even allow for a mistake of an hour plus, right? It's not pshat that we're assuming, right? It's not pshat that we're assuming.
More leeway for mistake.
You have an hour for mistake. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying that b'soif shalosh, if it happens b'soif shalosh, right? Either it happened b'soif shalosh, the end of 3, and that's what the person who said. That's what the person who said. Shalosh is going to happen because it happened b'soif shalosh. And the person who said chamesh meant it happened b'tchilas chamesh. Whereas, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we allow a discrepancy of an hour plus, and therefore, even if it happened b'soif shalosh, not only if it happened at 4:30 can we accept the one who says 5 hours. No, even if it happened at the end of 3, right, we still can allow the person who said 5 because it's only an hour plus, right? It's only an hour plus, a discrepancy. Or if it happened to Schilas Chamesh, the person meant Saif Shalosh, right? And therefore, it's also an hour discrepancy. Right, so according to this understanding, Rabbi Yehuda allows for a discrepancy of an hour plus. Right, and in the first shot, we're very limiting it. We're saying that we have to assume that it happened at 4:30. Therefore, Yehuda allows only a half-hour discrepancy, and he must have meant the end of 3. He must have meant the beginning of 5. It was only half-hour discrepancy. Here we say no, right? Yehuda really allows up to an hour, even a little bit more than an hour discrepancy. If it happened at the end of 3, right? It could have even happened at the end of 3, and we're still okay with that, right? And the person who says at the beginning of 5, even though he's an hour plus off, that's okay. Or if it happened at the beginning of 5, the person who says 3, also it's okay, right? So comes out according to Rabbi Yehuda, right? You're allowed to be off a little bit more than an hour. Right, okay, then let's just do one kasha before we say Rav's Pshat. Also, we're going to raise Rabbi Yehuda. He says, Amar, if we were to examine these witnesses, we meant betchilas shalosh. She meant b'soif chamesh.
That's more than the hour.
Right, and as Rav is asking, what are we doing over here? Bezins are sitting there, listening to the Eidim, and deciding and saying, oh, must be he meant this.
Yeah.
It's not a steer because he meant the end of 4. He meant the end of 3, and he meant the beginning of 5. So it works out. He meant really was 4:30, and it was a half hour. Ask them, speak to them, talk to them. What do they mean?
Yeah.
Right? Because if he actually says I meant b'tchilas shalosh, and he says I meant b'soif chamesh, that means you're 2 hours off. So, and according to Abaye, it never worked. No one allows 2 hours off. Right? Like Atlinan, we're not supposed to kill based on this edus. We're going to get up and kill misafik because we misafik assume that this is what they meant. Rahmana v'shafto eda v'tzilu eda, right? The eda has to judge and they have to look for ways to save the person from being murdered. So Rava says the idea is not that we assume anything. Right? The point is that even if we would ask the aide and he says, yes, I meant it at the beginning of the second hour, right? And the other one says, yes, I meant it at the end of the third hour, it's still okay. That's what Rav Meir is saying, because the margin of error is just less than 2 hours. So we don't have to ask them. Why don't we have to ask them? Because even if it's at the furthest points, it doesn't make a difference, right? And the Rabbi Yehuda, Adam Taya, Sholashai is Chaser Mashu. Right? Liver may Adam Taya Shtei Shai is Chaser Mashu. Who Maisek you have it was Oibet Chilash time, Oibet Sof Sholash. One of them is making a mistake, Beishai is Chaser Mashu, and that's not a problem because Rabbi Meir holds that's a legitimate discrepancy, margin of error. The Rabbi Yehuda Adam Taya Sholash is Chaser Mashu. Maisek you have Oibet Chilash Sholash, Oibet Sof Chamesh. Either it happened at the beginning of the third hour or at the end of the fifth hour. Right? So there's 3 hours in there. So even if it happened at the polar opposite time, it's still okay. We still can accept the edus because that's an acceptable margin of error. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask from other Mishnayos, and then eventually we're going to get back to our Mishnah. And that's why we're bringing this over here. That Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, we have to fit their margin of error with what they hold over here that a person might
As the margin of error gets bigger and bigger, then it's going to be harder to reconcile with that.
Right. According to Rava, who holds it's much bigger, so why is Rabbi Yehuda? Right.
No.
Right. So that's how we're going to deal with it. Okay. Bez Hashem tomorrow will be Mamshech.
Astronomy,